Oh, good evening and welcome to this People Before Profit meeting on building fighting trade unions. You probably expected to see Bríd Smith speaking here, but unfortunately Bríd's been a bit delayed in the Dáil, where ironically they're discussing a motion or a bill from Sinn Féin on trade union recognition. She will be joining us briefly. In the interim, I'm going to chair for the moment. And so, as I said, welcome to this meeting as part of our People Before Profit Join the Trade Union Week. But in this meeting, we specifically want to discuss what kind of unions do we need to meet the needs of workers and fight for their rights. We have a good panel of speakers, if I say so myself, being one of them. We have Amy Hourigan, who's a Debenhams Striker in Tralee, who's been a stalwart of the strike, and will be speaking about that. We've Jim Larmour, who's from the north and is a member of Unite, but has been an organizer for Unison. And I know he's going to speak about some things, but he will talk about our trade union freedom bill that we've been pushing in the north to remove some of the restrictions on the right to strike, which have become really important today in the context of threats to the Debenhams workers, of injunctions to stop them picketing effectively at the shops. So there's a lot of issues to discuss. So we'll get on with this. So the first speaker said is Amy Hourigan from the Debenhams Strike, who's based in Tralee. So I'll hand over to you, Amy.
Hi everybody, thanks Eddie. I suppose just to give a little bit of background about myself, my own name is Amy Hourigan. I've been working with Debenhams for the past 13 years and I have been a mandate member since the day I started. We were made redundant on April 9th. We found out via email, which was an awful shock to everybody at the time. Since then, we have been picketing outside the stores 24/7. We are coming up on our 6 months anniversary tomorrow, which, to say the least, is just an astonishing achievement in itself. We began picketing while mandate were in talks with KPMG initially. I suppose, to give you a little background on the picket lines, our picket lines are predominantly women fighting for their previously agreed enhanced redundancy of 2+2. This was negotiated for by our 11 shop stewards, the national team and mandate with the company back in 2016. We have been fighting for this because it has been a tactical liquidation. We are saying from the get-go that there has been asset stripping of the Irish company, Debenhams Retail Ireland Limited, on 2 separate occasions in the High Court. A previous director, Ian Deegan, had declared that the online business was an asset of Debenhams Retail Ireland Limited, and this has since been changed over to Debenhams UK, the parent company. We are saying that had this not have happened, there would be funds there to pay for our enhanced redundancy. The stock has also been grossly underestimated by KPMG. So at one point, they even had as low a figure as 1 million put on it. We know this not to be true. The cosmetics alone is worth 14.8 million from our last reports back in March of this year. So the workers have not accepted what has been put to them, and we have been out on the picket lines ever since. This week, we have been told, actually in the last 24 hours, that KPMG are now seeking to get an injunction against us. They've named 3 of my colleagues, one from Cork Mahon Point, Carol, and 2 gentlemen from Waterford. These colleagues will have to go to the High Court on Tuesday. But not only that, it doesn't just affect them, it affects all the picket lines up and down the country. They are trying to put a stop to our effective picketing, as we have been doing for the past 6 months. But our message is loud and clear. There's over 300 women that are willing to continue with our picket. So we just need to continue our battle and see what happens from there. On top of that, we have been lobbying TDs. We've been in negotiations with other unions. We have had 2 motions over the summer be presented in the Dáil, one by Mick Barry and one by Joan Collins. This government has amended both, watered them down to being just reviews. And we are calling on the government for more action to support the workers. They can't let workers be arrested based on these.
You okay, Amy? You're back in.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you froze there for a minute. Keep going. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So, we're looking for all the TDs to come out and support us. We are hoping that with the threat of the injunctions, that they will support our colleagues, that sorry, my brain's gone. Would you like to come in, Eddie?
No, you're fine. Keep going. You're grand.
I've lost my train of thought completely. We've had full support, like I said, from many TDs, including senators. We've had public backing nationwide. We've had people from the Socialist Party, Sinn Féin, People Before Profit, Soc Dems. What we really need, though, is dramatic change in how unions work. We need the unions to unite and fight for change in relation to the 1990s Industrial Relations Act. This act really neuters workers and the unions in that we can't actively picket. Things like our sit-in in Cork would be deemed illegal based on this act, which we found was a just thing to do at the time. It's not something we wanted to do, but we felt our voices really needed to be heard. We really just feel that ordinary people like ourselves, our backs are against the wall. The government really needs to come out and start fighting for us. I suppose it's great to see the different unions uniting together. So we've had great support from SIP2 Unite. We get letters regularly from across the pond from other unions, constantly telling us that keep going, keep doing what you're doing. So it really helps. But as you can imagine, it's getting cold out there. Our picket lines are, like I said, predominantly women, and some people have been in the company for over 30 years. So they're really starting to feel the effects. Luckily for us in Tralee, we have a little marquee, but there's other picket lines up and down the country that don't have any shelter at all, and it's very, very cold. Henry Street had a little fire pit, which has since been taken away from them by the centre management there. So anything that people can do to come out and support us on the picket lines would be greatly appreciated. If you can come down and do a few shifts to help cover, give other people a break, we would really appreciate that too. Alternatively, if you can send letters to TDs fighting for us, fighting for our rights, we would appreciate that. And not only that, come and stand with the people on the picket lines.
Okay, Amy, thanks a million. That was great. I'm going to hand the chair over now to Bríd. She's joined us from the Dáil, where I say she's been speaking in a debate about trade union recognition. So handing over to you, Bríd. Take the chair from here. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, folks, that I'm late, but I hope you can hear me and that I don't make a bags of this chairing, because when you come from one thing to another all of a sudden. But however, Amy, that was brilliant. Fair play to you. I haven't met you before, but you're very inspiring and clearly a strong fighting woman, like most of the Debenhams workers are. And I think we take all the speakers first. I think give you 10 minutes each, and then we'll come back and allow a chance to ask questions. I might say a few words myself towards the end, if that's all right. So do you want to come in next, Jim? Jim Larmour from Belfast?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Okay, many thanks, Bríd, and thanks very much, Bríd, and thanks, Eddie and Amy. That was fantastic. And I think, starting off with what Bríd said, I think the women workers at Debenhams have been an inspiration to the movement, to be out fighting for so long, and fighting for a win, hopefully. And there's an old saying in the trade union movement, I think it was attributed to the trade unionist in England initially. He said it, the old saying was, if you fight, you don't always win, but if you don't fight, you most certainly lose. And I think that's certainly the situation there. The people have fought and have shown a tremendous fighting spirit. And we had a group of Debenhams workers up in Belfast over the summer, picketing outside Debenhams in Belfast. I know in Derry, the comrades have been doing solidarity work there too. And I think it's vitally important that, we take that fighting spirit that the Debenhams workers have shown and translate that throughout the trade union movement, because there is a tendency within the trade union movement of a certain sort of pessimism that you can't really change anything anymore, that the laws are against us or whatever else. And the reality is, when workers do take action and do fight, that it's extremely popular nowadays. The public's on your side. And the thing is, when you fight, you do win. Workers can win. And what we should be demanding out of the Debenhams dispute is that the ICTU, for a start, and mandate trade union. I mean, okay, we're in a pandemic and things are difficult in terms of organising, but at the very least, at the bare minimum, what they should be doing is calling out activists to come and support the pickets, to publicise the event, to raise it in any way that they can, really to help the workers there. I think that's vital. But just to go on to that, I mean, there was mentioned there that laws and injunctions are going to be used against us. And the reality is that the law has always been on the side of the ruling class. It's always been on the side of the employer, and it's always been on the side of private property. And you've seen that an example. And governments, irrespective of what government, have always acted in the interest of these people. I mean, James Conlon made the quote, governments in a capitalist society are but a committee to run the affairs of the rich. And I think that's spot on. It hits it in the head, So the demands of the Debenhams workers are modest demands. All they're asking for is to be paid what they're owed, basically. They've been made redundant and they're asking to be paid what's due to them. They've worked hard and made big profits for the company. And really, the government should be backing that. The trade union movement should be backing it wholeheartedly. The old argument, an injury to one's an injury to all, is totally relevant in this case. And what I'm going to argue is that the reality is that any progression the trade union movement has ever made throughout history of the movement, it's always been that if laws are against us and laws are unjust, we have to challenge them. I mean, the reality is, hundreds of years ago, it was legal for children to work in factories and be exploited in factories. There was no health and safety laws at all. Workers, wasn't uncommon that workers would be injured or die on the job. The age for working class people for life expectancy was around 30. And these things were all legal. These were all part of the law in both Britain and Ireland. And it was people struggling, fighting against unjust laws that changed that and changed it for the better. And the thing was, the old kind of myth of the benevolent government or the benevolent employer handing it down to you, this was never the case. Everything that was fought for was won. And the reality was these people resisted it at every turn. And for every victory, there was defeats. And, it took a long period of struggle and it took a long period of time to get the basic rights that we have now. And the reality is, that those rights will always be up for grabs. But what I want to speak about briefly is in the north, particularly in Britain and also Ireland. Ireland in many ways has just took on the model of the same laws as Britain. We have some of the most restrictive anti-trade union laws in Europe in terms of taking action to defend your rights at work, taking action to even the very fact of being in a trade union and being recognised in a trade union, representing your workmates at work. there's a lot of restrictive laws against that, and something I'm going to come on to in a bit, talking about the NHS strike last winter in the north. I mean, the restrictions involved in that and what our organisers and people, the admin people had to do. The organiser hadn't put that together. It was basically jumping through hoops in terms of all the different things you got to do and giving workers addresses and then giving the employer a couple of weeks' notice of what action you intend to take, giving the employer then the opportunity to make a plan in terms of how they're going to manage the strike, if they're going to bring scab labour in or whatever. So what we're looking to do through People for Profit in the north, and I know Bríd will probably touch on it, and our TDs in the Dáil are planning to do the same thing in the south, is to try and bring forward a trade union reform bill that will make it possible. There's been so many anti-trade union laws. I mean, you couldn't actually count them in terms of how many different bills have come in since certainly Thatcher's era. But the whole idea in its own modest way is to begin to break this down and make it possible for workers to take effective strike action without the threat of the law being used against them. To make it possible to have solidarity action when one group of workers are taking action. That, you know, it was always the case the trade union movement came out in solidarity and supported other groups of workers. To take away the need for notice periods, to let the employers defend that and kind of fight from their side of thing, and take away the whole need for postal ballots and the time it's spent in that. And just to give a couple of positive examples of fighting trade unionism and what we need actually in the trade union movement, I'm going to give two examples from the north in the last year, which I think, you know, I think they've been underestimated, to be honest, and I think they're tremendous examples of working people taking action to defend their own rights and being successful and actually winning. The first example I'm going to give you is the Belfast shipyard. Back last summer, August of last year, 2019, Belfast shipyard was facing closure, and the workers there basically had their backs to the wall. They had no other alternative. If they hadn't have fought or done anything at all, the place would have been closed now. It would have been long gone. And what the workers actually did when it came to that, they occupied the yard and they fought for 6 weeks, and they were successful. It was 100 workers, members Unite and GMB. They mounted a picket round the clock, 24 hours on the shipyard, and they were successful in actually defending their jobs, and they got a new buyer in, and those people are still in work today. And that's the whole argument. They had nothing else to lose. And, you know, people could have said, oh, you could have walked away from it. Like the Debenhams workers, they decided to fight. They thought it was something worth fighting for. And the trade union movement fell in behind them and supported them. And they won. And they're still there today. And I think that's extremely positive. If people haven't caught, there was a documentary on a couple of nights ago on BBC about it, True North. You can still pick it up in the BBC iPlayer. It's a tremendous example of working people taking action to defend their own jobs. The second one I want to make is something that I was involved in myself. The NHS workers went on strike November through to January last winter. At a terrible time in terms of weather. It was horrendous weather. Every day in the picket line it was lashing with rain and cold. But the background to that was back in 2015, the Stormont establishment decided to cut pay parity between workers in the north and workers within the rest of the UK on the auspices of Tory austerity. And basically, with 4 years of campaigning in trade union every year, and the pay rises were falling way behind. So what we were really left with last year was a difference in pay between workers in England, Scotland and Wales and what they would be paid in the north. And that difference was substantial. It was running into thousands of pounds for nurses and people in certain grades. And the trade union members had decided enough was enough, and we voted for strike action this year. And I remember in one of our hospitals back in August, we started off, we had a lunchtime campaign or dispute to kind of highlight the thing. And as usual, it was about 12 to 15 people of the usual suspects. It was the branch committee members, the stewards, and a couple of full-timers from Unison. And we thought to ourselves, you know, we've got a job to do here to win this vote and to certainly win this action. And we spent months basically all our activists going around the hospitals, going around the wards, going around the staff rooms, leafleting the members and building support for it. And when it came to November, it was overwhelming, the support that we had. We had picket lines in some of the hospitals of literally hundreds of people out. The support from the general public was fantastic. I mean, people behind us. The media tried their best to get people on and say, what about your services being cancelled? You're not blaming the workers or whatever. And they couldn't find one person actually to come on TV or the radio or whatever else form of media and blame the workers. Everybody said they supported the workers. The problem was at the top and how the NHS has been privatised through the back door, how things have been run down and underfunded by the Tory government. And it was fantastic. And we finally won victory in January of this year. And the rate of pay was pay parity was brought back in the same as the UK. So I think those things are vitally important. That's the type of trade unions we need. We need trade unions who are there to defend their members and going to fight for their members constantly. And just to conclude, what I would say is going, I don't know if some people were online on Monday night's meeting where we had people talking about precarious work and younger workers. And I think if we're going to look at the trade union movement and how we organise for the future, this is vitally important. I mean, I don't have the figures for Ireland, but the UK figures now, there's something like 2 million people are considered precarious workers. That's either people on zero-hour contracts or people on bogus self-employment. You see employers who basically claim people are self-employed even though they're not. They're working for a company. And the reality, the people speaking the other night about how to go and organise there, I think that's the way forward for the future, because I think the trade union movement in general, a lot of unions have kind of been caught like rabbits in the headlights in terms of how they used to organise in the old days. And they've seen manufacturing and all these type of things under attack and a lot of job losses. So there can be a certain pessimism there. But when you look at actually the reality of how young people are organising in the tech industry, there's some great examples in terms of Deliveroo and Uber cabs with the Independent Workers Union, where those people were basically considered self-employed workers with no rights. They were expected basically to provide everything for their own jobs and whatever. And they've actually got some excellent ideas in terms of organising. They've got good young people getting out there. They're organising migrant workers with multilingual leaflets. They're trying some great initiatives in terms of getting people into the union. The same with the Uber cabs. And even though it's a small example and it's a small trade union, it's actually extremely positive in terms of some of the things they've done. And if you think of the reality, I mean, this is nothing new. The whole idea of zero-hour contracts and bogus self-employment and zero rights at work is nothing new. If you go back a century when, workers used to turn up to the docks or a factory on a daily basis to get picked to see if they got a day's job or not. 100 years on, nothing's different. The only difference is technology is different. You do it via an app nowadays, where a worker will get a shift from a manager or on WhatsApp, they'll get told you're working tomorrow or you're not. So, I mean, the reality is the things it faces are exactly the same. And this sort of notion that it was somehow easier to organise in the past, you take it, people like Conlon and Hourigan went out and organised the people who were previously unorganised. The lowest paid workers, women workers, and it's the same situation nowadays. And I mean, one of the people speaking on Monday night was from the tech industry, talking about the gaming industry. This is a multi-billion-pound industry, and the workers are extremely powerful. They're the people who actually design the games and do whatever else, and they're beginning to organise within the trade union movement. So I think the future is positive as long as we have fighting trade unions that are going to organise and look towards that. Because the technology of work might change, but the reality is the exploitation's there, and they're bigger than it ever was. There's billions of pounds being made at this point in time, and the working class has never been bigger throughout the world. So just to conclude briefly, the reality is of the pandemic that we've seen recently is that the working class and workers in general have been to the floor again. You take it, healthcare workers, people working in care homes and hospitals, people working in supermarkets, shops and factories. These are the people who have came to the forefront, and people realise these are the people who actually really run society. These are the people who are important in society. These are the people who keep industry going. It's not some billionaire at the top who's really important. It's working class people. And the reality is the working class has never been bigger worldwide, and it's never been more powerful. The key in actually building a positive trade union movement and building a better future is realising that potential power and using it to their advantage. So I'll just conclude there. Thanks.
Have we lost Bríd again? I'm not quite sure. Okay, well, I think what I'll do is I'll just make my contribution then. Are you back?
I'm back, but listen, Clyde, this is very frustrating. Least of all for me, everybody watching, and it's not very appropriate. What's happened is I'm doing this off my phone, and usually the phone is perfectly fine, but for some reason I'm losing it all the time, and my computer doesn't. In this particular office,
Okay, Bríd, you're live now, so people are hearing you. Okay, I think the best course of action maybe is if I just make my contribution, and then Bríd's obviously having some technical problems from the dial there. So maybe I'll just start. So what I wanted to, so I've been an activist in the TUI for longer than I care to remember, since the late 80s. I think I joined the TUI in 1988, and everything I say in general about the trade union movement is confirmed by my experience in the TUI over that period of time. But just to, I want to make basically say three things, probably at a bit of length. But one is, why do we need fighting trade unions? Why don't we have them? And secondly, what would a fighting trade union look like? And the first point to make, we need fighting trade unions because the form of trade unionism that we've had in the South, certainly since the mid-1980s with social partnership, has been a complete and utter failure. And there's a mountain of evidence to support this. And indeed, we produced, People for Profit produced a pamphlet at the end of last year on workers' rights, which really didn't get the attention it deserved, I think, but it illustrated very clearly how poor workers' rights were, despite all that period of social partnership where the unions claimed they had influence over the government and employers. It demonstrated very clearly how poor workers' rights are in this country. A quarter of the workforce is now considered low paid, the third highest level of low pay in the OECD. Nobody, and this was crucial during the COVID pandemic, became a crucial, is a crucial issue, still is. There's no statutory right to sick pay here. We've one of the worst sick pay regimes across Europe, only rated with Malta and Britain right at the bottom, where you have to wait for 6 days before you get any sick pay, and then it's played at a flat rate. We've very low levels of protection against dismissal. Again, if we look at this compared to other European countries, we're 21st out of 24 in terms of the protection that we offer people from dismissal by their employer. And on top of that, we have things like a two-tier pay system now in the public sector, where the unions claim they have significant influence. So the reality is that under social partnership, the unions were absolutely unprepared to use the enormous potential in the movement. There's about 700,000 workers affiliated to the ICTU in the 32 counties, and the union leadership have proved incapable of mobilizing that force for effective and real change. And the reality is now only about a quarter of workers are in a union in the South. It fell from about a third in 2005. It's now about a quarter, and it's much lower in the private sector. We don't even have the right to have your union recognized, so that you can join a union and the employer can ignore you, which is why this week People Before Profit published a bill to allow for mandatory union recognition, If 20% of the workers are in the union, the employer will have to recognise this, and there'll be sanctions if they don't. And the bill will also give unions access to that workplace in order to recruit more people into the union. Only 1/3 of workers in Ireland are covered by a collective bargaining. The average across Europe is about 70%. In 2018, there were 10 strikes, and that's been the average for a number of years. In 2012, in fact, there was 9, but the average has been 9, 10 over the last decade. When you compare this back in 1980, there was 132 strikes in 1980, and the key thing, and I'll return to this, about over 80 of them were unofficial. And the reality is, with all this social partnership that we've had, what's actually happened is that workers are losing confidence in unions. So when we advertised the events for this week, we got a lot of negative commentary on Facebook and so on about, unions are past this, they're in bed with the bosses and so on. And that's true to an extent. But the reality is they haven't fought for workers, which is why workers are now disillusioned with unions, and particularly the people who run them. And particularly a lot of young people are very cynical about the way the unions function. And on top of all that, if the things weren't bad enough, during the period of social partnership, the unions agreed to the 1990 Industrial Relations Act and accepted that it would be implemented. And it's now coming back to haunt us in a big way, as we can see now in the Debenhams dispute. The effect of the 1990 Act was basically to disallow effective picketing. You're not allowed to picket effectively. You can stand on a picket, inform people about the strike, but you can't do anything to stop goods going in or out, or to stop people crossing your pickets and so on. So the unions actually agreed to the Industrial Relations Act. Now, the reality is that if we compare that and what's gone on in the last number of years to what happened when actually the unions did fight. So as I said, during the period up to 1980, there were a considerable number of strikes, and many of them were unofficial. And unions actually used their muscle to make achievements for workers. And what happened in that period is union membership skyrocketed. And it increased by 70% in the period between 1960 and 1980. And in fact, by 1980, 2/3 of workers were in a union. Compare that to the quarter who are in a union now. And the other big thing we note, that in that period of time, about 2/3 of national income went to workers. Now it's down to about 44%. So we can see a direct relationship between the preparedness of unions to fight for their members and the benefits it actually brings to workers. So we need to get back to this fighting spirit, and we have to ask the question of why don't unions fight? Now, some people believe, the Industrial Relations Act explains everything. Now, we don't support the Industrial Relations. We want people to break it, actually. We think it should be removed from the statute book and all the restrictions in it, which is why we support the Trade Union Freedom Bill in the North, which has the same intent. And we support Mick Barry's bill, which wants to do the same in the South. We believe the Industrial Relations Act is a serious impediment on the willingness of unions to fight. But it's not the only one. And we say a key issue is an existence within our movement, we call it the trade union bureaucracy, of a layer of people who are cut off from the ordinary experiences of workers, who are paid too much, who are, as I said, cut off from the experience of, if they go in and negotiate a pay cut, they don't experience that pay cut, but the workers do. The general secretary of my own union, for example, earns about 150,000 a year, which is way in excess of ordinary teachers, and certainly way in excess of the new teachers who are coming in on these low pay scales. And the reality is the union bureaucracy places itself as an intermediary between workers and employers, and basically says their skills as negotiators are more important than the mobilization and organization of workers to fight. And the reality is they end up thinking like the employers. They believe that compromise is always necessary, and they're not prepared to fight to win. So we say that the existence of this layer of people in the movement is a serious problem. And therefore we need reforms like the election of all officials should be elected. They should be put in the same pay as ordinary workers. And if they don't carry out the instructions of members, they should be fired. It's straightforward as that. These people should be accountable to the people they represent. So we say, yes, we need fighting unions, but we also need democratic unions. So what will a fighting union look like? Well, there's a couple of key things. First of all, it would get out there and recruit people. The unions are not out there recruiting workers into unions. The main reason why people don't join unions is nobody ever asked them. So the unions need to begin to take seriously the task of organizing people. And we have been calling through this trade union week for people to join a union. Despite their faults, it is better to be in a union than not to be in one. And although I know the Debenhams workers are very dissatisfied with the way the mandate has handled their dispute, and they're correct, but the reality is, if they hadn't had a union in Debenhams, they wouldn't have had the entitlement to the extra 2 weeks redundancy pay that they're now fighting for. So it is important to have a union to fight for these things. Secondly, a union would organise, but it would also put the members first. It would say, when people want to struggle, we will support them. We will get behind those who want to fight, and we will put serious resources behind those who want to fight. And we will fight not just on pay and conditions, which is extremely important, but we'll also fight in the wider issues of housing, for proper healthcare, and so on. So we will get people involved, empower people at the level of the workplace, which is where the power of the union resides, and it will be prepared to use strike action as a legitimate weapon to achieve the things that people need. And crucially, and I'll finish with this, unions, fighting unions, will stand from the principle, as Jim said, of an injury to one as an injury to all. And in the Debenhams dispute, and I'll finish this because I've just come from a meeting that Amy was also at earlier on with the Debenhams shop stewards and others to discuss the response to these injunctions. The reality is this: the trade union movement more broadly has not done enough to support the Debenhams workers. We now have a situation where these workers who've fought an amazing battle in very adverse circumstances with COVID, with harassment from the police, people getting arrested and so on. They fought an amazing battle. They have not had the support from the trade union movement that they deserve. So what we've got to do in the next few days, before this court hearing on Tuesday, we've got to demonstrate what a fighting union movement would do. We've got to get out there. We've got to kick up a political storm so the judge gets a message that there's a whole layer of society, the whole layers of the workers' movement support these workers, and the idea that the injunctions will be taken and they might be imprisoned will be opposed, and opposed at every turn. Now, it's difficult, I understand, in the situation of COVID, but we cannot allow this brave group of workers to go undefended, and they need to be supported by others across the movement as a whole. So a fighting trade union movement would prioritise that. It would break the industrial relations, it would call for people to break the industrial relations legislation, and would say the laws are stacked against workers. We need to fight, we need to break unjust laws. Thank you. Okay, I think Bríd is still having some problems with her technology. So I'll just take the chair, and maybe we just take some of the questions that are coming in from people who are watching. Okay. So here's one for you, Amy. There's a question here from Kieran which says, Amy, what has she learned so far from involvement in the Debenhams strike in Tralee? Amy, do you want to take?
I suppose, Eddie, chance that I've learnt many things, but the two that would stand out would be, firstly, to push the boundaries, to challenge laws that don't support workers or the people. If we continue to accept poor treatment, nothing will change. And I suppose then secondly, that ordinary people can achieve brilliant things. Like we've forced KPMG, the government, and Mandate to listen to us when they point blank were refusing by stepping outside these boundaries. So they'd be the two things.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So there are other questions coming in there. There's a lot of questions coming in, really, a lot of support coming in for the Debenhams workers that I can see in the chat here. So here's another one for Bríd Ryan, sorry. Why are trade unions too busy occupying themselves with getting around the boardroom tables rather than getting on the streets and picking lines with their members? Jim, do you want to address that? You've some experience organising workers in the north.
Yeah, I think you're correct, Brenda. The role of trade unions is to defend the members and be in support of the members. So what you should be is on the picket lines with your people, supporting them. You go to the boardroom when you're going to finally negotiate a deal, but not before it. So yeah, 100%, you're correct. I think the reality is there's good trade unionists, obviously full-time trade unionists, and there's bad ones. Some of them are there just for a career. Some of them are there because they passionately believe in it. And I think as socialists and trade unionists, what we should be doing is we should be supporting and applauding those that fight and calling out those that don't. Basically, I think that's the way it is. Trade unions have to be built from the bottom up, democratically run by the members for the members. And I think the best trade unions show that they're democratically run. I think the worst ones show that they're not. They're run from the top down.
Okay, somebody's saying that I totally agree with you. But Jim, could I just ask you specifically, what key proposals do you think we need to push to change the situation? I mean, we've all been trying. I've been trying the TUI for years to bring in democratic reforms to get the general secretary elected and so on. Have you seen good examples, maybe, of proposals that have been implemented to make unions more democratic?
It has to, it's like this, it never really changes that. It has to be built from the bottom up. You have to have good activists in the trade union. You have to be good shop stewards. Because I think a lot of people on the left have mistakenly took the view that it's all about electing a left official and somehow that'll change the union. If you get a left general secretary in, it'll change the union. In reality, that's substitutionalism, really. You know, some people might talk very left and do the opposite. The reality is you need good trade unions, democratic unions with good activists, and you start at the bottom and you build the union that way. It's not just all about electing the right people in at the top for policies.
Okay, so somebody says here, unions are for the people, not the employer, because they make money out of both. Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand that. But okay, here's another one. We all need to rise up again. We can't let them bring us to our knees. This is what they want to control our nation, probably hacking all our devices. Not sure about that. But Amy, maybe I could just ask you. I mean, did you have much involvement with mandates, say, before the strike? I mean, what would your attitude be to, say, get more involved in the union after it?
I suppose I would have been a manager in the Tralee store, so I would have always been on the other side of the table, even though I was a mandate member. And I have seen over the years that they come in and they actively help individuals and that. But from this experience, we really need to change how unions are working. I personally find them extremely passive. Everything seems to be on the long finger, even in relation to when the Joan Collins motion was being presented in the Dáil. They had a package for people to go lobbying, but this package wasn't being delivered until the day after the motion was being voted on, which I found completely bizarre. So we asked for them to send us PDF versions so that we could do our lobbying previous to the Joan Collins motion. I think that we need serious activism within the unions, and I think that's only going to come from the next generations with new ideas.
Okay, thanks, Amy. There's lots of comments flying by here, congratulating you on how well you've done tonight and so on. But could I just say, from the point of view of people before profit, and just to pick up on something that Jim said there, we are of the view, that, as Jim said, that electing people at the top, changing people at the top isn't enough. We need to make the unions more democratic from the bottom. That doesn't mean to say that people want to run, say, for lay positions such as president of a union and so on, we're not prepared to get involved with that and work with people who want real change. But we think the key thing is at the bottom. So we are of the view that what we need to do is build a network of militants across the different unions who work together to fight for democratic reform and a more militant approach. So we're very interested in people who are interested in that idea of joining up with us. We want to form groups in the different unions so we can push for real change. Now, I believe in the chat there's a sign-up sheet. If people want to send us their details, we'll get in touch with them. Let us know what union you're in, and we can begin to really push this agenda forward, because we have organised the Trade Union Week on the basis of 3 basic ideas. We want to activate people, get into your union, join a union. We know there are problems with them, but you're better off in one than without one. Secondly, get involved. If there's a committee, if there's a job, it's a committee in your job, it's a shop steward's position, get involved, go for it. We need people like you with the sort of ideas that we're discussing here to push for real change. And thirdly, we need to reform the unions. We need real democratic reform at the top so that unions are run by their members in the interest of their members, not by people who are overpaid and are out of touch. Okay, somebody says here, we need to get youth involved in unions and all positions of unions, not just activists. I think you might be better to talk about that, Amy, than us 2 oldies here. Do you have any views about getting young people more involved in unions?
I just think in any walk of life, the youth bring new ideas that may not have been discussed or even thought about before. Like, I even see my own young fella pushes the boundaries with me every day. So when you see people who negotiate on a daily basis coming off the line, you just know that change is coming. So I think it can't do anything but bring new ideas and different ways of thinking to the table. And it is definitely a time for change.
Okay, and do you think young people might be more disposed to joining union these days than maybe in the past?
I suppose in the past, unions it was a part of, like when you joined a team or joined a store, it was very much you are joining the union. Like that's how it would have been with us in Debenhams back in the day. Whereas now I've heard of businesses locally that there is no unions, and these are big corporate businesses that have been in the area for years. And you would have presumed that they would be in the union, and there's no union representative inside. And it's shocking, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's a very different age that people choose not to. And like I said, I wouldn't always agree with what the union does or the decisions they make, but I think you are absolutely better off to be in a union than not in one at all.
Okay, that's great. And some people have just reminded me there that I've written some articles about some of the topics we're discussing. I wrote a number of pieces through the COVID crisis about workers, and I've also written more recently about the problem of the trade union bureaucracy. You can read some of them in Rebel News if you have the time. Okay, so how about some demands? Direct annual elected officials on the average member's wage. Absolutely, that is absolutely fundamental to the sort of change we're looking for in the unions, that they have to be, the officials have to be elected and they have to be on the same wage as the members, so that if members' pay is affected by any negotiations they're involved in, that they feel the effect as well, and they don't have this problem of getting cut off from the experience of ordinary workers. Jim, do you have any comments on that? I know you worked as an organizer in Unison for a while.
No, I mean, I've got nothing more to add to that, Eddie. I would endorse that, obviously. I think we've got to be careful in terms of what we would phrase it, because there can be a misconception sometime about union officials. I mean, it's not a simple job. It's a 24/7 job. You don't turn off, and certainly I think some of the salaries are way too much, and I agree they should be paid an average worker's wage. But I think we've got to strike a balance in terms of how we kind of operate in unions. We've got to fight for more democracy, and there is a lot of good officers there. I mean, certainly I've been involved in a lot of different unions in my time. and Unison's probably the most democratic union I've been involved in, and I've nothing but good things to say about Unison. I think they're extremely well organised. They're as I say, democratic union. They're 83% women within Unison. In terms of equality, they're fantastic, and in terms of international issues, they're very good too. So some unions are better than others.
Okay, so this is a good comment here again from Bríd Ryan. Union representatives should learn a lot from the commitment and solidarity shown by Amy and all the Debenhams workers, fighting for the respect and fair treatment of workers who are thrown into the liquidation process without any consultation. Stand strong. Any response to that, Amy? I've heard Jane Crow talk about how you guys have moved from being ordinary people to extraordinary people. She said you never envisaged being in the position you were in.
That's very true, Eddie. I don't think any of us ever envisaged being on the side of the road in pickets for over 6 months. But I suppose as the fight continues, we're getting stronger and stronger by day, and you get to a point where you've given too much. You're not going to walk away. So no, people have been amazing, and it's like we've got women 64 years of age on our picket lines coming day in, day out. It's amazing what ordinary people, like Jane said, have achieved. Fantastic.
Okay, there's an interesting question here. I think you've mentioned some of the things you've learned so far, but another interesting one here in the chat about how we could involve people from the wider community in the Debenhams strike, getting them on the pickets lines and so on.
Initially, my first thought would go to helping cover ships on the pickets, because after 6 months, they become rather difficult to fill, and it might mean that somebody who has been there for 6 months can have an hour away from the place. Other than that, it would be messaging TDs, messaging the unions, building up presence on social media, putting pressure to KPMG, basically just showing solidarity with the workers, challenging anybody that has a say or a stake, and really getting behind the Debenhams workers.
Okay. Right, Conor Reddy here as a comment for the whole panel. I'm part of a group attempting to organise our ununionised workplace. PhD researchers in Trinity, I think Conor works. If you give us one piece of advice, what would it be? Now, Jim, you've been a union organiser for a long time. Here's somebody trying to organise a bunch of workers in their job. What would you say to them?
What I would say, Conor, I mean, obviously you're starting from scratch there. What I would tend to do, I mean, we've done this in a number of places like care homes or whatever. You start small, you recruit people. You obviously got to be kind of careful in terms of it's non-unionised, it might be hostile. So you work amongst the people, you get the numbers together, and hopefully you get enough numbers to get recognised in. So it's all about kind of, you understand your own workplace better than some other people in terms of what way you would do it and what tactics you would use. You got to be careful on how you do it. But it's about recruiting people and getting the numbers there, and then hopefully fighting for recognition.
Okay. I think that's some good advice. I think tread carefully, patiently. I mean, these things have to be done carefully, in my experience. Give people a bit of confidence, find an issue that people want to fight on, and really then, when you feel you're ready to go for it. But also make sure the union supports you. I think sometimes we let the union off the hook sometimes because we can be overly critical. We are critical of officials and so on, but we should also insist that they help and support activity and particularly efforts to organise workers on the ground. Okay, so next one. The Debenhams workers of this generation's done apartheid strikers. Like them, the Debenhams workers will be victorious. Well, we hope so, but let's hope it doesn't go on for that long. I think the Dunn strike went on for over 2 years, so I remember being involved.
2 years and 9 months. Karen Gearan has been a massive support to us here on the Tralee picket line, and she'd never forgive me if I didn't get the 2 years and 9 months part in.
Okay, so I think she has been a bit of an inspiration for you down there.
Karen's been amazing. Do you know when you're exhausted and you just need somebody just to tap for that little bit of re-encouragement or inspiration. She has been an absolute gift to us here in Tralee, and the wider Debenhams dispute. I know that she's been in contact with many other shop stewards and other people who have been supporting us, so she's been very good.
Okay, so she has been wonderful, I think, through this dispute. Okay, we now have a question on the 1990 Act, and people shouldn't forget, I think, as Jim said, pretty much the same legislation applies in the North. I remember campaigning against the 1990 Act when it was brought forward first back in the late 80s. And indeed, people may not know, a very good pamphlet on this Act was written by Eamon Gilmore and Pat Rabbit, who were officials in the Irish Transport at the time, basically decrying the provisions of the Act and its restrictions and so on and so forth. And it was very interesting at the meeting I was at earlier on with the Debenhams workers, where people were saying, what have we done? You know, they've just engaged in normal industrial relations activity. What do you do in a strike? You try to either keep people out or in this case, keep the stock in. They've done everything they can to keep the stock in. And now they find they're in breach of the Industrial Relations Act. I read the affidavit today from KPMG, and it's very clear what they're saying. They've obviously been observing very closely what the Debenhams work have been doing, and they're citing every instance of a red alert, of mobilising people to the picket, of every blockage of a car or a truck that was trying to bring stuff out. As said, normal things you would do in an industrial relations dispute. Now they're looking for the judge to deem these acts illegal acts and to get an injunction to stop specified people. 3 people are named in the affidavit, but also everyone else who is aware of the injunction and everyone else who's involved in these activities at any site where Debenhams is operating. They want an injunction to basically stop effective picketing. That's what they're looking for. So we argue in People for Profit absolutely is correct, as Jerry has done in the North and as Mick Barry has done in the South, to bring forward legislation to stop the industrial relations, to amend the Industrial Relations Act. We also believe people should break it. We should bring that law into disrepute and demand that people be allowed to picket effectively. And it's very interesting to note, if the trade union movement was to take a decision to have a strike against the Industrial Relations Act to get rid of it, that would be illegal under the Act itself, but the Act bans what are called political strikes. So I don't know if you want to say about the situation in the North, Jim, in relation to the legislation, and maybe say a bit more about what you're doing to try and change it.
Yeah, no worries, Eddie. I think in terms of legislation, I think basically Thatcher first brought it in the 1980s. There's been a lot of bills, and I think the government in the South basically incorporated the same bills into the legislation. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're pretty much, there's some small differences, but pretty much the law is the same, both sides of the border. And again, I mean, it's a simple point. The trade union movement has always been built on fighting unjust laws, and when laws are against you, they got to be challenged. And I mean, there's no ambiguity about it. The Debenhams workers have seen that in action. The law is there to protect the employer. It's to protect the state. What the Debenhams workers are asking for is something very simple. They're asking what's owed to them. It's a very modest demand, and the reality is the amount what the state is preparing to do and trying to do to stop that shows you what side they're on, and we got to change that. And it's the same in the North. I mean, to have a legal strike, to take action to defend workers' jobs is extremely difficult to do within the law, because the law is geared against you. And what we're saying is, in a democratic society, a decent society, you shouldn't need those laws. You shouldn't have those laws. Workers should be able to defend their right to withdraw labour. They should defend their right to negotiate on behalf of their members in the workplace, to negotiate, to fight for health and safety rights. I mean, in terms of the pandemic at the moment, certainly in my job role, I've been bringing around members about PPE and care homes and things like that. And I've heard some absolute horror stories where our people who are low-paid workers working in care homes have contracted COVID and been out sick and only getting SSP of £95 a week. So they have the indignity of going to work and doing a job to the best of their ability, getting ill because of that job, and then only getting paid statutory sick pay. And lucky enough, Unison Trade Union has been able to get involved in that, and through the trusts, the private employers have get bailed out, and some of these people get paid now. So we've got to really change all these laws. You know, they're designed against working people to keep working people down, to keep them exploited, to keep the profits going in massively into the hands of the rich. And if you see the way, certainly since the years of Thatcher and Reagan in the 80s, when union busting came on board, and a lot of other companies have covered it, there's been a massive transfer of profits to the rich at the same time as the working class movement has been attacked and damaged. But what I would say is a positive thing is that despite all this, trade unions will always be there. Working people will always struggle. As long as there's exploitation of workers in a capitalist society, you will always have those that will struggle and rebel against it. And there'll always be another generation to take that up. And I think that's a positive about it. And what the anti-union laws have done, and they've been quite clever, because these people don't throw these in just at the drop of a hat. They're think tanks, and they're people who research these things and make decisions on what laws they're going to go for and how they're going to change them. The whole basis of it is that the trade union movement is held accountable for their members. So hence, if members take action, what you see is they threaten to sue the trade union and take the funds off the trade union. And that's designed to frighten the members and threaten the members and not to do anything. And really, we've got to take those type of laws on. You know, they're completely unjust, and they've got to be fought.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Right, there's a lot of similar questions coming in. I think we've dealt with some of these issues in relation to the Industrial Relations Bill and the Trade Union Freedom Bill and so on. Here's an interesting one here. There should be a commitment from every union on the island to send comrades to each and every strike of other unions to stand and support picket lines, particularly with long disputes. An injury to one is an injury to all. How would you feel about that, Amy?
Yeah, I think when the 1990 Act deciphered the unions down into transport union, workers union, retail union, etc., that's when we really became divided. So I do think that if they were to commit that every union on the island would stand together, it would be extremely strong and a clear message.
Okay, I think that's a good message. So I think we're going to leave it there then. Jim, do you want to say any last comments? Jim?
My feelings are still hurt at age, or describing me as one of the old ones. I thought you were one of the younger members in the union here. No, but I just want to end by saying, I mean, Amy, it's been fantastic listening. You've been inspiring, and I think all the workers at Debenhams have been, you know, given you've got nothing else to lose and you've fought, and that fighting spirit has been fantastic, you know, and what we've got to do is translate that, you know, throughout the movement. And I agree, anything that the trade union movement can be doing to help us, they should be doing, because, I mean, it's absolutely despicable the way the Debenhams workers have been treated. It's criminal. So it is, and we've got to keep fighting.
Okay, so a lot of great support coming in there from Amy on the chat. So I just wanted to end up by saying a couple of things. The sign up is in the chat there. If you're interested in working with us on these issues, talk to us even about getting organised, please feel free to send your details. As I said, we have two bills now running. We have the bill in the north, the Trade Union Freedom Bill, to repeal the restrictive laws in relation to strikes. And we also launched this week a trade union recognition bill in the south. We know there is one. It was just a coincidence that the Sinn Féin bill came out of the hat, and the lottery system in the Dáil is being debated at the moment. We're unsure that's going to be passed given the current makeup of the Dáil, but we'll be pushing our own bill. We support the Sinn Féin bill, of course, but we will be, if it is defeated, we'll be then promoting our own bill, which is a little bit different in terms of the mechanisms in it for enforcing union recognition and also providing access to the workplace for unions. But I really want to end by this. This is a really crucial day in the Debenhams strike. The threats to the workers from KPMG are serious. Tomorrow evening, there's going to be a huge online rally, we hope, run from the Stand with Debenhams Workers Facebook page. This will be the 6-month anniversary of the dispute tomorrow. Speakers will include some of the shop stewards themselves, Jane Crow, Carol, who's threatened with one of these injunctions, Carol Ann. There will be our own Bríd Smith will be speaking. Hopefully she won't have the difficulty she had tonight. Mick Barry, Mary Lou MacDonald, Karen Gearan, who Amy mentioned. So a great lineup of speakers, a really important rally in the context of where the dispute is at, and given the COVID situation, we can't do these things other than online. But having said that, it is really important in the next few days that as many of you get down to the pickets as possible. We've got to give the 2 fingers to KPMG and to the state. We need to get everyone down to the pickets, practice social distancing, of course, and taking all the proper precautions. But we cannot allow these workers to be isolated. We cannot allow them to be criminalised. And we've got to stand behind them. And if we have any notion that we can build fighting unions in this country, we've got to demonstrate that we can stand behind people like the Debenhams workers. So I urge you all to get fully behind them in the next few days. Get down to the pickets. Do what you can on social media. There's various things being planned. I don't fully understand them myself, all of them. But get involved in any way you can. Just to read here, sorry, there's a message from Bríd here, sorry. Bríd sends her best again to Debenhams workers and support the Sinn Féin bill tonight, citing one, historic shabby laws are the reason Debenhams workers are here. Workers should be paid. Even Kieran Wallace of KPMG said so. And Nick should call for a national day of action by all trade unions across Ireland. Solidarity and apologies for the tech problems. So I want to endorse that call as the point we made at the meeting earlier on, that the other unions have got to get behind the Debenhams workers and ensure that they win. So I want to thank Amy. I think you did it amazingly well. And thank Jim too. You were also amazingly well, given your age. And if you want to continue the discussion with us, please sign up on the chat. Keep the comments coming in, and we'll see you at future events from People Before Profit. Thanks very much. Okay.